All right, so this week it looks to me like we're beginning at Leviticus chapter 19, and we're on going to start on verse 24. Now we left off with 25 or 23 rather last week, and that's when you enter the land and you have planted all your trees for food. Circumcised that calling something uncircumcised to call it unclean, which I pointed out for the Christian audience and the New Testament followers, talking about the circumcised and the uncircumcised, particularly in the letter of Acts, like, uh, chapter 15, I think. The Christians have gotten off on thinking that, okay, this proves that guys don't have to be circumcised. And no, it has nothing to do with that. The circumcised were the Torah observant Jews, and the uncircumcised were the non Torah observant Jews. As a general rule of thumb, sometimes the case was if you lived outside of Israel proper, way out in the more Greek speaking areas, and particularly if you didn't speak Hebrew, you probably didn't have a rabbi, and you didn't if you did, they were called dogs. That's who Yeshua was referring to when he spoke to the woman who said, even the dogs eat the crumbs. He actually was calling her a rabbi. She would not have been a recognized rabbi in Jerusalem, but she was obviously recognized by Yeshua and in the place where she was. But it's not likely that she spoke Hebrew, so she would have also been called Gentile. See, the only people in the New Testament, for the most part, that were called Gentiles were actually Jews who came from the line of Abraham. They were called Gentiles again because either they didn't speak Hebrew or they lived in a place where they didn't have a rabbi and a synagogue. Those were called the Gentiles. The people who lived, say, if you lived in Italy, you would have been called a Gentile. Even if you had a synagogue and a rabbi, you still would have been called a Gentile, because Gentile derives in a kind of a roundabout way from the Hebrew word goim, which means nation. And so you're from another nation. You're a Gentile because if you're not from the nation of Israel or not living in the nation of Israel in the biblical times, you were called goim, uh, which got translated into as Gentile in English for some reason. I don't really know why. I don't know why they wouldn't just say nation. It's certainly closer to what it means. So anyway, we see this being used of the trees. You consider them uncircumcised until they've been in the ground. So in verse 24, it says, very literal English, and in year the fourth, he will be all fruit I could say it instead of he. Holy praises to Yahweh. So if I said it, and in year the fourth, it will be all fruit, holy praises to Yahweh. Now you got to realize this isn't a new sentence. Yes, it's a new sentence in a modern Bible, but there were no chapters and verses in the original Bible. You didn't have chapters and verses in the New Testament. You certainly didn't have them in the Hebrew Bible. That didn't exist until the 800 or 900, something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head. A monk came up with that. He did a relatively good job of it, but by the time it hit English, things had changed up a bit. And the reason is because in Hebrew, sentences can be just pages and pages and pages for a single sentence. Yes, that is the way it worked in biblical Hebrew. It's broken up into separate sentences because English doesn't work that way. Though that would be an enormously, that a run-on sentence, if you will. I mean, if it's several pages, that's beyond being a run-on sentence in English. But though they were broken up that way, so this is still part of 23. It's not actually a new verse, though it is listed as a new verse because of the work of that monk. Anyway, so remember, it's already said that in when you come into the land and you plant your trees, they're uncircumcised, which meaning that they're unclean, and you're not allowed to eat them for 3 years. So it continues on and says, and in the fourth year, you'll be able to eat from that tree, because by then it will be considered circumcised. It will be considered pure, clean. That's what the whole idea of circumcision is in the biblical text. So it's, Uva Shana Ha Revi'it, which is, and in the fourth year, Kol, which is all, Pirgo, there goes my, man, I've got dry mouth so bad these days that I can't even roll my R's anymore. That's the word for fruit. It's fruit because it has the vav at the end, so it's fruit, it literally, but we would say it's fruit. This is Kodesh. Its fruit is holy. It has been purified. It has been consecrated to God. Then it says Hilulim, which is praises, thanksgiving. It's a word used of festivals. And then it says La Yahweh, to Yahweh. So it's holy. It's a holy praise to Yahweh. Can I say it that way? My translation then is, and in the fourth year, all the fruit will be holy praises to Yahweh. All the fruit will be holy praises to Yahweh. So, meaning idiomatically that you can now eat the fruit. And see, it didn't come right out and say it in a way that we would say it. And we would say you can eat the fruit. But they said that it's holy praises to Yahweh, and that means you can eat the fruit. All right, so I'm going to move on to 25. There's not going to be a whole lot here with these verses like this. So 25, very literally, and in year the fifth you shall eat they, fruit it, to increase to you produce. Oh, dang, I may have read that wrong. It's kind of looking to me like it's saying in the fourth year you don't eat it either, because it's a praise to God. I took that completely wrong. But that doesn't make sense to me that it would say it that way. Let me look at this Hebrew. So in the fourth year, kol period, all the fruit, holy praises. Oh, yeah, if I changed that to 4, I think I would have caught on. All of the fruit is holy praises for Yahweh. So, no, he's not going to eat the fruit. So it's saying that the first 3 years it is considered uncircumcised, and in the fourth year it has become holy, but you're still not going to eat it in the fourth year as a thank offering, if you will, as a praise for Yahweh. Well, two is really maybe the best way. To Yahweh is still the really way to say it. You're giving up that fruit that is holy in the fourth year to Yahweh. You're just going to let it go ahead and just fall to the ground, which would also, I would think, that it would be something that the poor could still. No, if they're among your people, that would not work. Never mind. So even the poor are going to have to wait. All right. Ooh, that's rough. All right. So we have in the 5th year, you shall eat it, the fruit of it, in increase. I, Yahweh, am your God. Okay. So it starts off with the same words as the last one, except it's saying 5th year instead of 4th. And in the 5th year, tochlu, so that's you shall eat it. And that's actually written as a command. So in that year, you are commanded to eat of that fruit. And it's what you think. It's to devour. It's to eat down into to eat food. It's what you would think. There's nothing special about that word there. It is used in different ways. Is used of fire devouring something and stuff like that. So there are times when that's a pretty special word, but not in this context. So you're going to eat or devour, if you will, the piryo, the fruit. It's fruit of the trees that you have planted, where nothing has changed yet. Uh, and then it says lehosif, which is for the increase or to the increase, and it's to add, to increase anything, to do again, or it to be repeated. It's used in all those ways. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing the words. They're a lot smaller today than they normally are, and there was just nothing I could do about that. I'm having a lot of trouble with this file for some reason. Um, anyway, so the increase of its produce. It's because tevu ato of the produce of it. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward, I guess. I'm just after making that first mistake, I'm a little leery of just jumping right in there again. But it's saying that in the 5th year, you're commanded to eat the fruit of those trees. Then it says the increase is for you, lachem, it's to you or for you. Then it says te vuato, which is the produce of it. So you don't eat the tree, you eat the produce. Don't know why the writer felt that was important, but who knows. Then it says Ani Yahweh Elohim. So I am your God. I am Yahweh your God, is how that one ends. Maybe I ought to, I haven't spoken about this in a while, and maybe I ought to, because there was is something that came up on YouTube. I always look for something to watch when I'm eating lunch. And this guy was talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I've never heard of him. I didn't know anything about him. And he started talking, and he was bringing on Dr. So-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And he was this expert in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I don't remember any of the names. And I listened to this guy desperately trying to prove that Christianity and Judaism are false doctrines, and that Jesus thing was a hoax. And the that he was arguing with a guy who said, uh, one of the guys that was one of the translators that worked on the translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls for 20 years. He's the one that brought it to everyone's attention that the biblical text of the Dead Sea Scrolls was almost identical, was all but identical to the text we have of the Masoretic text. And the reason why that's important is that the Dead Sea Scrolls, the biblical stuff that's part of that, is 1,000 years older than the Masoretic text. And the Masoretic text is the text from which all Bibles, modern Bibles are taken from. If you have a Jewish Bible or a Christian Bible, that what the Christians call the Old Testament, what we call the Hebrew Bible, that comes from the Masoretic text. That's Hebrew, and there was a group of, it's written, of course, in Hebrew. There was a group of people called the Masoretes, and they came up with the Tiberian vowel pointing system. And it's called that because they were in Tiberia at the time. And they came up with this vowel pointing system, as it's called, because Hebrew doesn't have letters for vowels in Hebrew. Some people will say, yeah, the aleph and the ayin are used as vowels. No, they're not. They have never been used that way. To this day, they're still not used as that way. Oh, but the yod and the vav are used as vowels. No, they're not. No, they're not. This is from somebody who doesn't know Hebrew at all that would say that. We have vowel sounds, and we need placeholders, if you will, to put vowels every once in a while. Because if you have a vowel sound and no consonant to go to connect that sound to, then you use a placeholder, an aleph, a vav, an ayin, a yod. Those are used in that manner, but that does not make them vowels. They are not vowels. We don't have vowels in Hebrew. We have vowel sounds. And so the vowel pointing, if you will, it was just dots and dashes that represented the vowel sounds. And there's only 5 vowel sounds in Hebrew. There are a whole lot more polka dots and dashes for that to represent the vowel sounds and the stutter. We have a stutter in Hebrew. It's called a sheba. Sheba. It's a stutter. So you say Yeshua. If you say that, you're not actually saying Y-E-S-H. You're saying Y with a stutter and then saying S-H. Most people in the Western world who didn't learn to speak a language where they have a stutter in it, they can't hear the stutter. They hear yet. They hear Y-E when I do that. Where Hebrews can actually hear the stutter. It's just one of those things. If you don't, there's certain, like people who speak Greek generally can't make the TH sound because there is no TH in Greek, in the Greek language. Now, we see things as words are transliterated, not translated, because to translate a word is to tell you what it means. Eretz, that means earth, land, mostly land, but it is used of the earth. It can mean dirt, not really, but I mean, it could be used that way, but it's really the word for land, right? So that's a translation. If I transliterate, let's take the word amen. If I'm going to transliterate that into English, A-M-E-N, amen, right? So that in English, you can do your best to pronounce that Hebrew word. By the way, amen is a Hebrew word. So anyway, that's transliteration. Well, when you have alphabets that have different letters that have the same sound, like the tav and the tate in Hebrew both have the t, like a T sound. And so what the transliterators used to do is put the TH to represent one T sound and the T to represent the other. And somewhere along the way, the TH sound came along. There is no TH sound in Hebrew. There's no TH sound in Greek. It just doesn't exist. But you hear people make those sounds, right? There's no J sound, no W sound, and yet you hear people say Jerusalem. People in Israel say Jerusalem. No, it's Yerushalayim in modern Hebrew. It's Yerushalayim in biblical Hebrew. There's no J. There never has been. And oh, but God's name is Yahweh, because there's someone saying that now. No, it's not. There's never been a W in Hebrew ever. Where you get the W is when the Germans back in the 1850s, especially, started transliterating God's name. They put a W. Why? Because the W made the V sound. V. Yahweh is how his name is pronounced. And now you hear Jews saying Yahweh, Yahweh, and stuff like that. Holy smokes. All right. So you guys get what I'm saying, right? So this guy is going on about how all this stuff is fake. And the argument that he has against the man who made the declaration that the two are all but identical is he found a single, think of it as a little tear off of a page of paper about the size of your thumb. I mean, golly, it was small. And it had part of a verse on it, like 2 or 3 words from a verse on it. And at the very bottom corner, it had just basically 2 polka dots. And so since we know what the verse is and we know what it was going to say next, the professor who was making this argument didn't even mention it. Well, oh, see, there's some top secret thing, some what do you call that? Conspiracy going on. The guy didn't even talk about this one. His argument is so weak because he didn't talk about this one. And you know, he translated it with this word, and it shouldn't have been that word. It should have been this word. And his problem with the guy translating it the way he did was that he saw the 2 polka dots as representing a different word. 2 polka dots. It was the dumbest argument I've ever heard. He's arguing his argument for why he was right was his argument for why the other guy was wrong. The other guy was misinterpreting the polka dots. Oh my. There's been people like this forever. And when Catholicism came around, particularly when you get all the way into the Dark Ages, you had people showing up at synagogues dressed like any other Jew. And they would come in and try to use the fact that the word for God, Elohim, is in plural as proof of a Trinity. Now, the Trinity in the Dark Ages still wasn't accepted as an absolute fact by Catholicism. Technically it was, but they kept arguing about it. They kept getting back together and having all these conflabs and all these arguments about the Trinity. And it still kind of was a thing, but kind of wasn't a thing. It just depended on what part of Catholicism you were a part of. And they use something like the fact that the word God, Elohim in Hebrew, is plural. Well, plural is 2 or more. It's not 3. Plural doesn't equal 3. Plural equals 2 or more. So can it equal 3? Sure, but that's not the definition, right? So when we look at this word God, you know, someone will say, God damn it. And then everyone's, oh, you're blaspheming the name of God. God is an English word. God comes from English. The Bible was not written in English. It was translated into English. So no, you are not taking God's name in vain if you say those words. That is not God's name. It technically doesn't even mean God. It's from the idea of majesty. And it is used of God, but it's also used of false gods. It's not the word, right? And I'm talking Elohim. That's a generic word because they used Elohim of men in the Bible. They used Elohim. Yes, they did. And they used Elohim of messengers of God, if you will. I don't want to call them angels because angelology does not come from Judaism. Is it in Judaism? Yes. It found its way into Judaism in the Dark Ages, not before. So a messenger of God meant that it was a messenger, generally, that it was a messenger sent from heaven. A messenger of, but I shouldn't even say it that way. A messenger of God was Moshe was a messenger of God. Uh, Yirmiyahu was a messenger of God, and I'm just saying it's from the word El, and El means strong, mighty, a mighty hero. That's what it actually means. It doesn't actually mean what we think of as God. Who's the ultimate mighty hero? God. So you get the idea of the mightiest of heroes, and it's why they would use this generic word of God. But they are, like I said, they use it of false gods. They even use it of men. So the reason why it's in plural is because if your God is alive, then his face is always moving. His mind is always moving. His body is always moving. Even if you're stone cold asleep, your face still moves. Your body still moves because your chest is moving in and out. You're breathing in and out, and that affects your face. It makes it move. So if you're a living God, they called you God in plural. If you were not a living God, for instance, if you're an idol, then generally they should have used okay, let me say it this way. If they're not going to say false God, then but they want you to know it's a false God, they will say God in singular. If on the other hand they're going to say false God, they're going to generally say that in plural because there are many people who serve that God, or there's many of those gods, right? So the plural is used because there's more than one, whether it's of polytheism was everywhere except Judaism. You had monotheism at one point in Egypt. It was polytheism almost the whole time, but there was one period of time where one of the kings decided to go with the monotheistic idea. He did not last long. And that was probably a Jewish influence that caused that, because it seems to me that the wife was Jewish and got him to do that. But again, he didn't last long. So polytheism was when they're talking about false gods, there's never one. There's always a whole bunch of them. So that's why you see when they talk about false gods, you'll see that in plural as well. But again, that's because it's polytheism. In monotheism, if you have a religion that believes in one God, then if it's a false religion, they're going to say a false God, and the word for God will be in singular. I don't know if I messed that up, or I don't know if that's clear as mud, or or if I cleared that up, but I'm hoping I cleared that up. So in the 5th year, you're commanded to eat of the fruit from the increase of the produce of that fruit, of those trees. And this is a commandment given to us by God, and it uses God's name, his proper name, one and only name. God only has one name. He has lots of attributes, vaYiqra, God the provider, Yahweh Shalom, God of peace. Those are his attributes. They are not his name. He only has one name. What? Okie dokie. All right. So we're at 26, it looks like. Very literal English. Not shall eat they upon the blood, not practice divination, and not soothsaying. Okay. Now, again, we have not switched subjects here. The subject is still holiness. Remember, this is the holiness chapter. So the subject has not changed. I've got this thing covered up, a little cheat sheet. The topic is different, but the subject is not. And I do know that both of those words essentially mean the same thing. But I'm using subject for the overall subject and topic for things that break away that are still under that same subject. Okay? Hopefully you guys remember I explained all that once way back when. So we're starting off with lo, which is the negative article. Tochlu is to eat or to devour. All is on, upon, above. It means those type of things. Ha dam, the blood. You don't eat above the blood. You don't eat upon the blood. That seems kind of strange, but I'll try to make it make sense here in a minute. Then it says, lo, tinachashu, you will not practice divination. Now listen to this. Divination in the concordance says to hiss, to whisper, especially used of the whispering of soothsayers, to practice enchantment, to use sorcery, to divine. It's also used of those who prophesy and tell the future. It's used. Those people are often called soothsayers. It's generally because what they're doing is false. It's not from God. So even if they get the future right, if it didn't come from God, if it came from God, that would make them a prophet. It not coming from God makes them a soothsayer. So we need to think about this a minute. This word is never used in call, which means it's never used in its root in the biblical text. The root is to hiss. It's also the word for snake, so called from its hissing. To whisper, especially used of whispering of soothsayers, and then they connect PL, which is the most common usage of the word, to practice enchantment, to use sorcery. But it's in sorcery, it's generally used of something that's an omen, a bad omen, something that's foreboding. Can I say that? Then after you get this word, it says velo and not teonenu, which is soothsaying. The listeners are telling you soothsaying is. It says it's to cover, to gather clouds, to act covertly. Hence to use hidden arts, i.e. magic, to practice sorcery. Now, this word is also not used in call. It's not used in its root form, but we always have to go back to the root form if we're going to truly understand the word. That is an absolute must in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew anyway. And at the root, it's to cover, like the kindred verbs nanan or kanan, when whence a cloud, if you will. In PL, again, this is your most common use, to gather clouds, and poel is to act covertly, hence to use hidden arts, i.e., magic, to practice sorcery, mysteries, magical arts, whatever. So you have, you shall not eat it, we're speaking of the fruit, upon blood. You shall not eat it upon blood. Does that make any sense to you? Of course it doesn't. What should that tell you? Ah, we have an idiom. You shall not eat it when you're guilty. Upon blood, you become guilty of something. You get it? It's an idiom. You shall not practice divination, and you shall not practice soothsaying. Though it's essentially the same thing, there is a difference here between them because it is two different words. Well, it's two different words that essentially mean the same thing. So there is a little difference between them, but they're essentially the same thing. So this sentence should have ended in a explanation point, because that's why you have two words that mean essentially the same thing. You put them together, that adds emphasis. And that's important for us to know that we cannot do this. But why, Rob? That's not real. Really? Do you remember the story about a certain person going to a soothsayer, and that soothsayer bringing someone from the dead? And that person was a famous Bible character, and that famous Bible character asked, "Why have you brought me here?" Yeah, there's some weird stuff out there. How it's done, I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us how it's done, but it does tell us not to mess with it. Does that mean that there are ghosts, running around and evil spirits and stuff like that? It doesn't. The soothsaying was predominantly, as far as I can tell, about talking to the dead, and that apparently can be done. Houdini spent a great deal of his adult life trying to find someone who could really speak to the dead, spent a lot of money and a lot of time and effort, and never once found anyone who actually could. So all I'm saying is, good luck finding a real soothsayer. Just anyway, I don't know how it works. The Bible doesn't tell me, so I can't tell you. And I'm not going to listen to somebody from the dark ages who just makes something up, decides this is how it works. Sorry, I'm not going to do it. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Do I? Okay, I'm doing all right. Now our next verse is very literary in English. Not cut circle they, corner head your, and not you shall spoil, corner bearded chin you. So now we're getting into the one that some of us have been waiting a long time to get to. All right, so we start off with the negative articles. So it's not, you will not, you shall not, whatever. Then it says ta kifu. It's to cut, to strike, to fasten together as by nails, to join together, to join onto, to cleave together, especially used of something with a clasp, which returning back to itself forms a circle, hence to go in a circle. Okay, in Leviticus, let's see, 19, I forget what verse we're on, 27. Okay, so there's a note here. I'm rolling this thing in the wrong place. It says the following is elliptical. Leviticus 19:27. That's where we are. Ye shall not go in circle, that it has in parentheses in shaving, the outer part of the head, i.e., the ends of your hair. And they went on to say, and this is Justinius, by the way, this appears to refer to Arabs who used to cut off the hair all around the head, but left that in the middle untouched. God doesn't make any law according to what some group of people did. Right is right, wrong is wrong, truth is truth, not truth is not truth. You know what I'm saying? God doesn't base anything that he has ever said or done on the actions of someone else. He's not trying to avoid something that somebody else does. It just is right or it isn't wrong. So there are people that say, oh, well, God gave us that law because the so and so people used to do so and so. No, right is right, wrong is wrong. And God is the arbiter of what is right and what is wrong. So he doesn't base his laws on the things that other people do. Okay, so we have this question mark here. It's saying that there's something about making circles around your hair or something about cutting your hair. It's not actually quite clear at this point. Then it says pa'at. Now, some of you know this if you've ever seen a Orthodox, ultra Orthodox Jew. They have the pa'ah, the pa'at, the word here, and it's the sideburn. It's the thing that goes squiggly down the side. Not you shall make circles. Uh-oh. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, that's not what it's saying. But it struck me that way when I started reading what was said about this word. You're not going to cut, or you're not going to encircle, and what do we do? We got the spinny roundy sideburns, and the word pea is the word for sideburns, by the way. So you're not going to make your sideburns go in spinny roundy things. Uh-oh. Anyway, so pea is a quarter. It's even used of a quarter, like a quarter of heaven. They use it that way. The or maybe corner might have been better because they use it of the wind, so called, from its blowing. It's a side region, a corner, as of a field. You know, the corner of your field. Pea is used for that, but it's like the four winds and stuff like that. There's a note in here on this part. Jewish doctors rightly explain, speaking of this very verse, it was prohibited to shave them, speaking of your sideburns, and the Arabian nations shaving them like the Egyptians are called in reproach ketzuzei pe'ah, which is men with their whiskers cut off, basically, but that was a pejorative in their day. Men who did this beginning in the late 1700s and through the 1800s were called bald-faced liars, the men who started shaving their beards. The phrase took on a different meaning later when it changed to bold-faced liars, because, and that's where the idea for bold-faced liar came from. The Jews in particular used to call people who shave their face bald-faced, right? And so if you were a liar, you were a bald-faced liar. And if you weren't Jewish, you were a bald-faced liar, right? it was a little overboard. If you the Jews really shouldn't have spoken to people that way, but it eventually it got somebody wrote something in a newspaper and it became bold face lying, right? And it was in some way connected to the idea of bald faced. So it in the if you look at pictures from back in the 17, but mostly in the 1800s, you saw these guys with these big sideburns, but this part of their face would be shaved. They did that because of this very verse. They did that because God said you couldn't shave your sideburns. And so they would shave all of this other stuff and not shave the sideburns. But the next word here is rochem, your head. It's not, it didn't say your face, it said your head. So we've got the sideburns that are not to be cut. For the circle. For those of you who can't see what I'm doing, maybe just listening in, I'm spinning my hand, my finger around the circle of my rosh, of my head. That's the circle. The circle isn't the taking the sideburn and spinning it in a circle, because there's no cutting involved in that. The cutting is of the circle, the head. It says it right here, rosh. And it says your head. So that's sideburns and beard. It's not saying you can't cut the top of your hair. It's saying that you can't cut the sideburns and the beard, the circle of your head. And then it says, and not ta shechit, you shall not spoil, you won't ruin, you won't destroy et pa'at. You won't destroy your sideburns. Then it says, ze kanecha, or the chin. So it's becoming pretty clear at this point. Do not shave around the corners of your head. Neither shave the edges of your beard. The corners, peah, of your head. Neither shave your chin, your beard. Literally, it says chin, but it means your beard. So there's literally no part of this that a Jew is allowed to cut. vaYiqra 19:27. There's another verse I kind of wanted to point out in 2 Samuel 10:4, and very literally in English it says, and he took Hanun, that's a guy's name, servants David, so Hanun, the servants of David, and the servant of David, and he shaved off half bearded chins, and he cut off from garment them in middle until buttocks them, and he sent away them. So a king had died. He was a friend of David. And so David felt like, hey, I got to do something special for him. So he sent some servants to go help the son out of the man who died. And the son had, some wicked person whispering in his ear saying, oh, they're here, they're up to something, there's some conspiracy going on. And because he listened to that guy, he cut off half their bearded chins. Cut off or shaved is probably a better translation, because it says vaYiqra, so shaved is a much better way to say that. Then it's chotzi, which is half. Zekanam, the zignays. I can hear the word old from this because it's of the face drooping. So anyway, that's your chin, because I guess it's more of the droopiness down here that we all tend to get. It's maybe why God makes us wear a beard, so you can't see the droopy part. I don't know. Made vehem, which is from their garments. Anyway, he cut off their garments. Now, there have been people I've heard say over the years that when this happened, the reason why the servants didn't want to come back and face David back at home is because they were so embarrassed, because they didn't wear pants back then. They wore a tunic and robes and stuff like that. So it's more like a dress, if you will. And he'd cut off the dress halfway up the backside of their butts. And they didn't wear underwear back then. These weren't priests, they were servants, so they weren't wearing underwear. And so they're just all embarrassed. Well, why did they just put on some more clothes? I mean, they're the servants of the king. There wouldn't have been any problem for them to get new clothes. That's not what it was. This is very important to anyone who wants to live according to God's law. Not shaving this is very important. And I don't know if you knew this, but the Nazis did this same thing. They'd find these Jews, particularly the ones with the curly cues, the pea. Well, pea sideburns, but mostly people call the curly cues pea. They used to cut them off and used to shave part of the faces and stuff like that to humiliate the Jews. And I watched video of them doing it. It was very humiliating for those men. It was heart-wrenching. It was gut-wrenching. It was really hard to even watch, let alone to think, how would I have reacted that if they'd done that to me? That's what this was about. It wasn't about the clothing. They didn't have the same. You think of a third world country. You go to a third world country, little kids run around naked all day long, and women run around with no top on all day long, and nobody thinks anything of that in places like that. This is where they were, a third world country. You hear me? That it wasn't. People didn't get ashamed of things like that. That's why David didn't think anything about it when he was dancing and all his clothes fell off, And the only one that had a problem with it was someone from a foreign nation. They had a problem with it. The Jews did not, but she made a big deal out of it. Just look, do I have the time? No, I want to talk about this a little bit more, and I'm down to less, roughly 6 minutes, so I'm going to have to cut it off here. We're going to pick up with 2 Samuel 10:5, because it's still part of everything that we're talking about. I wanted to cover as many of the verses that talk about the beard as I possibly can. So at this point, I'm going to say shalom v'shalom, everyone.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh Panai Velecha Veyasim Lecha Shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.